So much about what makes us who we are comes from what we're taught when we're growing up. The values, the morals, the ethics, the life lessons that we learn along the way help us to be the person that we are. So much of who I am was instilled in me by my parents. I mean, just the gene pool, just watching them in their roles and how they interacted with others in our community, who they work with, just how they interacted and engaged with life in general. And I was thinking, and I was sharing with my daughter the other day, one of the life lessons that I was taught early on was to be able to identify and use my voice. That was something that was instilled in both my brother and I very early on in life. We were always taught to express ourselves. If you've been following me, then you've already seen the video on honesty. If you haven't, I'll link it here. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please like and subscribe so that every time I upload a new video, you'll be the first to see it. But in past videos, I talk about the fact that my mother was a teacher in the community in which I was raised, the district that I attended, and that my father was an elected official in that same municipality. So both of my parents had significant leadership roles in the community in which I was raised. And I talk about, just some of the values that were instilled in our family and in my brother and myself along the way throughout their various journeys. And one of which was to speak your piece. To, if it's an issue, to talk about it, to always be honest. We were raised to always speak our minds respectfully, but if something happened in school and we needed to talk to our parents about it, in particular my mother, then to be honest, to say what really happened, to say how we actually felt about the situation, to kind of plead our case. And that was something that was instilled in us throughout life, to be able to talk freely with our parents. And I can just remember that at a very young age, like I said already, my mother was a teacher in the district and was my teacher in the 6th grade. But as I got older, I remember being in high school and having teachers, a couple teachers along the way, threatened to call my mother, and did that in front of all of my peers, like in the middle of class. Like, Jennifer, I'm going to call your mother. Let me see what period she might be in right now. And I learned to deflect because they never gave me an opportunity to save face, which was, actually, this is not a good time to call her because she's in XYZ period. You might want to try it this time because that's typically her planning and or lunch, and you'll be able to reach her then, which instantly stopped the teacher in their tracks and going down that avenue of dangling this carrot, which was highly sensitive for me because everybody knew that my mother was a teacher in the district. Everybody knew my father was a councilman in our municipality. It was like a running joke with friends and peers who weren't friends, to be honest. So that just wasn't, in my mind at that time, and even looking back, an appropriate stance to take because no other child was in that position. No other child could have that carrot dangled in that manner. So I learned early on to kind of say, I didn't think that was appropriate. Don't do that. And life moved on for me. And I think even looking back, that was a defensive measure that came in early because keep in mind, my brother and I lived in a fishbowl of sorts because of the notoriety, if you will, of our parents. And no other kid that I am aware of dealt with the things that we had to deal with on an ongoing basis because of who our parents were. So I learned then. I learned when I worked at an area establishment that sold food that when my manager would run his fingers through my hair, that was inappropriate. And I didn't comb my hair and come to work for you to run your fingers through it. Keep your hands out of my hair. I mean, but at 16, not a lot of teenagers are comfortable saying those things. And I credit that and I attribute that to my parents who always gave us an opportunity to speak about how we felt about something. And so that kind of translated later on into life. And I would say one defining moment for me as a new professional, having graduated my first job. I was living not in the same city as my parents, hours away from my parents, working for a bank. And I remember calling my dad. I was super excited. The organization I work for, let me just give you a little background. This is how I got the job. So I used to sit in the bookstore as a senior in college. And back then they had the directories of all the organizations by industry, who the HR person was and how to contact them. So I would sit in the bookstore and write down all the HR people. At the time I wanted to be a banker. And so I would write down all the HR people for banks and send off my resume and cover letter and all of that. And I remember the organization I ended up being hired by, the HR person was like, man, I was so impressed with your letter that I wanted to reach out and call you. So she did. She called me. She told me that their management training class they had already recruited for that season for the upcoming year. But because she liked my tenacity in reaching out to her, she was going to create a spot in an interview for me. If I could just get down to this location on this day for a full day interview. Of course, I jumped at the opportunity, drove down, spent all day. That was no lie. It was a full day. I have not since that time have I experienced an interview like this that went from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. Like even during your lunchtime when they fed you, they were still drilling you and asking you questions, people from all over the organization. But I got the job and I was super excited about it. I moved to that city and got an apartment. My parents, helped me get it all together and left out. And I remember, being as much as you want to get out of their house, as much as I was like, yes, I'm about to be grown, make some money, pay my bills. It was very bittersweet and scary to be in another part of the state, in a new city that I knew absolutely nothing about, in my first full-time job. So fast forward, I've been there a little while, maybe a couple weeks. I'm into another rotation in my management training program where you rotate through departments. And the recruiter, who I have a great relationship with because of all of this, calls me. And she's got this great opportunity to go back to my university for a multicultural career fair. So she asked me to come down to her office. So I go down to her office. She's like, yes, Jennifer, we're going back to your campus on this date for a multicultural career fair, and I would love to take you. Typically, Carlos has gone with us. I was another employee at the bank, but he's gotten older, and so now that you're new, I'd like to bring you on board if that would be something you'd be interested in. I'm like, absolutely. I'm super excited. And she's like, okay, so what I'll need you to do is call one of your friends that's still on campus and ask them if you can stay with them. And then maybe you can eat with them too. And I was like, okay, what do I know? It's my first job. I'm like, yeah, sure. I still have some friends on the yard. I'll give them a call. She's like, great. We'll be down there for 2 days and you can stay with them and eat with them and catch up, when we're not working. I'm like, great. So I ride the elevator back up to my desk. I'm excited. I call my dad. I'm like, call him at work, like, Daddy, guess what's going to happen? And I tell him, and he was like, oh, that's great. So what, where are you staying? Are you renting a car? And I'm like, no, I'm going to call one of my friends and stay. He was like, what? It's like, yeah. So she said, I need to call one of my friends and stay on campus and then eat with them. I can hang out with them when I'm not working. He was like, so let me understand this. She wants to take you to a multicultural career fair at your university that you just graduated from. And she wants you to stay with friends on campus, sleep with them, eat off them, and go to work. I'm like, yeah, isn't that great? He was like, no, it's not great. What you need to do is, this is a trip. You need to understand this is a trip that you would not have taken had it not been for the fact that you're going on business. This is a business trip. This is not a personal trip. You're not going down because you want to hang out with some friends for homecoming. You're going and you're going to work on behalf of this organization, recruiting other students to come work for them potentially. Baby, you need a hotel room. Where's she staying? Is she staying on campus? Like, Daddy, of course not. Then you aren't either. You need, I can laugh about it now. I wasn't laughing then. I can guarantee you. You need to get a hotel room and you need a rental car. Well, Daddy, she said we're going to ride together. That's fine. If you want to ride with her, that's a concession you want to make, then you can ride with her. But you need your own hotel room and they need to feed you. Otherwise, you're going to spend money out of your pocket to eat for a business event. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood what he was saying. And unfortunately for the recruiter and everybody else, they didn't understand that my dad, especially at that time in my life, had the greatest level of influence on me. I was more afraid of disappointing him than I was of disappointing anybody else. So this is how we ended our conversation. Mind you, I'm in my office and he's in his office. And he said, okay, so go back down to our office. Call me back when you get back up to your office once you've settled things out and tell me what the new arrangements are. So I'm like, all right, okay. So I hang up the phone. And people who know me know that our interactions are typically not that smooth. Like, I'm not a yes, daddy kind of girl. But I do I still have always valued their input. And I've always known deep down inside when they're making a point that is for my good. A point that I know that as I weigh it out, it really makes sense. And it's going to be for my best interest, even though it's painful for me at that moment. I hung up the phone. I got back in the elevator. I was a couple floors above her, so that was great. I could think for those floors. I wish that ride was a little bit longer, to tell you the truth. I get back down in her office. I'm like, hey, do you have a minute? She's like, sure, come on in. Now, how do you start this conversation? Do you say, hey, I was talking to my dad? No, that's not where you start as a grown professional. I say, I've been giving some thought to the opportunity. I look her straight in her eyes. Inside, I am nervous as hell. Okay? Real talk. On the outside, I'm cool as a cucumber. Another thing taught early in life, never let them see you sweat. I say, I've been giving your opportunity some thought. And I decided that in order to be able to go and take this trip, the bank would need to pay for it, because otherwise I would be incurring expenses that I wouldn't be if I was sitting here, if I was doing my job here every day as opposed to traveling. And she was shocked. She couldn't even camouflage it. Like, her eyes are big. She was like a deer caught in headlights, because I'm sure as a, bank trainee back in 1996, where paying your dues was the phrase du jour, that was the mantra. If I tell you to staple papers all day long for 8 hours, you sit there, smile while you staple papers because you're paying your dues. She was like, I don't understand. Carlos has always gone with us. It's never been a problem. I was like, well, I wouldn't have a problem at all and would completely understand if you want to take Carlos back again. But it's a multicultural career fair, and I'm going to be there working, encouraging students to apply and consider a career at the bank. And I think it's only fair that the bank would pay for, my housing and my meals while I'm there working. I don't have a problem, riding down with you or any of that. It took her all of 2 seconds to say, fine. Pretty close to that type of tone. She was not happy, but what she knew that I didn't know in my naivety was she needed me. It was a multicultural career fair. And where they had gotten over in the past, if she wanted to take me, she would not be able to conduct herself in the same manner. The bank would have to pay for my expenses just like they would have to pay for hers. I went. We worked. It was a great experience. I recruited for the bank, and in the evening I caught up with some friends and, hung out with them. And I remember when we got back in the car, back then, hotels charge you for local calls. I don't know. We're in the cell phone era now. I don't know if they charge you for calls or not, because who needs to use a hotel phone other than to call down to the front desk these days? But as we loaded up in the car, she was like, "Oh, so I see you called a couple friends, huh?" She had my phone calls circled on the bill. I said, "Yeah, I did. When I was off in the evening, I was able to catch up with some friends." But by that time, I understood fully the lesson that my father was trying to teach me. And I have found the beginning of my professional voice, a voice that would do nothing but grow and get stronger over time. And for that, to this day, I am extremely grateful that my father put that kind of pressure on me, because I am a firm believer, based on other roles that I have played in my life as it relates to being a domestic violence advocate and other roles, that once you start letting people encroach upon your space and your feelings and your rights in one area of your life, it's much easier for them to continue to do the same in every area of your life. And what has always been important to me was to be able to face myself and to be able to live with myself when it's all said and done. Now, I know my parents are probably watching this here video. Did I take every piece of advice that they gave me or continue to give me? No. No, I'm not even asserting that here. But I am saying that there are very foundational principles that have governed my life that have come from the tutelage of my parents and the guidance that they have given me over the years, that has proven itself to be true and to be valuable.